This video will cover the endocrine system and the action of hormones. The components of our endocrine system are glands, which are a group or collection of specialized cells that will secrete hormone messengers directly into the bloodstream. Hormones themselves, which are small chemical messengers that will travel within the blood to the different body tissues. And the receptors, structures to which the hormones will bind once it reaches its target cell. So regardless of the endocrine gland or hormone in question, will follow this same pathway. So the endocrine gland will secrete its hormone product directly into the bloodstream. This chemical messenger will travel within the blood until it reaches its target cell. Here it will bind to a receptor and enter into the cell, which triggers a reaction, and thus the cell will carry out a response as a direct result of the hormone binding to its receptor. Now look at each of the different endocrine glands that you need to be familiar with. So starting with the hypothalamus, which is found within the brain. This is also known as a neuroendocrine gland, as it's part of both the nervous and endocrine system, has functions in each. In terms of its endocrine action, it is responsible for making what are known as releasing hormones, with the target tissue being the pituitary gland, another important endocrine gland within the brain. So this is the starting point for many of the pathways, as these releasing hormones will tell the pituitary gland to release other hormones which will travel to all the other endocrine glands, which will make their own hormone products. So this is very important in terms of regulation, making sure hormone concentration is at a safe level, and that hormones are only released when they're absolutely necessary. Moving on to the pituitary gland, this is known as the master gland, as it's responsible for the production and secretion of many different types of hormones. So the pituitary gland will release its own hormones under the instruction of the releasing hormones from the hypothalamus. Stimulating hormones made by the pituitary gland will then travel in the bloodstream to the other endocrine glands, which will in turn release their own hormones. So it's all part of this regulatory pathway between the hypothalamus to the pituitary to the other endocrine glands. So the examples that you see here is by no means an exhaustive list. There are lots of different hormones that are secreted by the pituitary gland. The thyroid gland, we find this within the neck. The hormone it produces is thyroxine, or T3. T3 thyroxine, its role is in regulating metabolism, i.e. how quickly our body will use up the nutrients we obtained from digestion. So the thyroid gland will release T3 into the bloodstream once it's received that signal from the pituitary gland, which release thyroid stimulating under the instruction of the hypothalamus. So here is that pathway. The hypothalamus releases thyroid stimulating hormone, travels to the pituitary gland to make TSH, will travel to the thyroid gland, which will in turn release T3. So TRH to the pituitary, which makes TSH to the thyroid, which makes thyroxine. Zoom in on the thyroid gland. It's important to make sure we don't have too much or too little of a hormone. For example, if we have too little thyroxine, this will lead to lethargy, to tiredness, as we don't have enough of the hormone to make good use of the nutrients. But at the same time, if we have too much, This is when we will have hyperactivity, we will burn through those nutrients far too quickly. So this is why it's important to always maintain the correct level of thyroxine in the bloodstream. Other endocrine glands include the adrenal glands. These sit right on top of the kidneys. The main hormone released by the adrenal glands are adrenaline. It's one you might be familiar with. It's part of the flight or fight response. So if you find yourself in quite a dangerous situation, you might have heard of an adrenaline rush. This is about preparing the body to be able to survive, either by fighting our way out of the danger or by flight, by removing ourselves from the danger. So adrenaline will prepare the body for this action by doing things such as increasing the heart rate to increase blood flow to your muscles, by increasing your breathing rate so that you're bringing in more oxygen, or perhaps by dilating the pupils in order to allow for more light, more information to come in through the eyes to the brain. Another endocrine gland is the pancreas. Pancreas we covered as part of the digestive system, but one of its roles is in producing hormones that help to ensure the correct concentration of sugars are maintained within our blood. So the blood sugar glucose, if levels become too high, this is toxic, can damage our blood vessels. Therefore, the pancreas will release insulin. However, we need sugar, so if levels drop too low, our pancreas will respond by releasing glucagon. The target of these two hormones is the liver, as the liver can store extra glucose for times of need, which will be released when levels are too low, or more will be stored when levels are too high. We also have the testes and ovaries as part of the endocrine system, but we'll look at each of these in more detail once we cover the reproductive system in a separate video. One of the important features that hormones and endocrine system are responsible for maintaining is homeostasis. This is the process by which our body maintains this healthy internal balance. We don't want anything to be too high, our hormone levels to be too high, but we also don't want them to be too low. Everything has to be kept just right. So things we can keep in balance by maintaining the correct levels of hormones, things such as water levels, our metabolism as we saw through the action of thyroxine, and glucose blood sugar through the action of the pancreas. Because this is such an important process, we have to have a means of regulating our hormones. So we do this via a mechanism known as negative feedback, where we keep the level of hormones constant in the bloodstream. We'll use the example here of maintaining the correct levels of thyroxine T3. So you can think of the hypothalamus as being the on-off switch. If we need thyroxine to be produced, then the hypothalamus will make TRH, thyroid releasing hormone, travels to the pituitary gland, which in turn makes thyroid stimulating hormone. As TSH will then travel to the thyroid gland, where T3 thyroxine will be released. Once we have enough thyroxine within the bloodstream, if it's reached too high a concentration, this will be detected by the hypothalamus, which now goes on into the off position. The hypothalamus doesn't make TRH, the pituitary gland will not make TSH, and therefore the thyroid gland will not make any more thyroxine. This is until thyroxine levels drop too low, in which case the hypothalamus is switched on again, releases TRH, which means TSH SH is released, and thus the thyroid gland starts making T3 once again. All this ensures the body is kept in a steady state, but we always have the correct concentration of a hormone when we require it. We've now looked at both of the action of the nervous system and the endocrine system. These two body systems quite often work together in order to ensure that homeostasis via these negative feedback loops. So that this is the way our body can respond to changes both in our external environment and our internal bodies. And this can be in the short term or over long periods of time. Right, want to pause the video at this point and see if you can identify whether these features are part of the nervous system or if these are part of the endocrine system. So the answers are nervous system works very quickly to respond. Endocrine system has a more long-lasting effect. Endocrine also sends information via chemical messengers, whereas the nervous does this via electrical impulses and neurons. In the nervous system, chemical messages will diffuse across the synapse between neurons, whereas the endocrine chemicals are made and released by the glands. These go directly into the bloodstream, but both will work together to coordinate a response by the body. If you have any questions or queries, feel free to leave them in the comment box below.